Greetings and welcome back, everyone, to The Angry Chicken, a podcast about Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft. I'm Garrett Weinzierl, and I'm joined, as I always am, by Miss Jocelyn Moffat. Jocelyn.
Hello, everyone.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, it's a normal episode, like we always do, with nothing special whatsoever.
Nah, nothing's going on. Nothing's different.
Not at all. Wait a minute. Wait. I'm hearing just now. Yes, coming in. We are joined live by the art director for Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft, Mr. Ben Thompson. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you both.
We were not aware if there was more than one Ben allowed to work on Team 5.
Team 5 has more repetition in names than I think any other team at Blizzard. It really, we're trying to keep it capped at 2 per name, and there's been a couple that have eked over that. So.
Ah, gotcha. You just need to start adding like monikers, you know, like Hearthstone cards. You have the Mad Bomber, then you just have Matter Bomber. So you could be.
There you go. We've become very military. Everybody goes by their last name. If you have a repeating name, then it's just last name.
So everyone just yells Thompson.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, what if there's more than one Thompson?
So far, so good. Although they're at the company, there is at least another 1 or 2 Thompsons. So hope we can never be on the same team now.
And Thompson even sounds like something someone would be yelling into a radio in an old World War II movie as well. Like I totally hear it in my head.
I hear it in my head often.
Well, welcome to the show. First off, thank you so much for coming on. As Jocelyn could back up, I'm a huge art nerd and I've been wanting to do an episode kind of centered around the art of Hearthstone for a while. But it would just be kind of weird if we didn't have one of the artists from Team 5 here to talk about it, because then it would just be me talking about how cool everything is.
Which is cool too.
Well, now we get to do.
I'm humbled that you would want to talk about art for part of your show. I think that's awesome.
Well, awesome, great. Well, then we should get along splendidly. So you even brought some images with you. So I know this show generally is consumed by the masses in audio-only format. So right here at the top of the show, I'm going to just give a little plea to our audio-only listeners. I'm going to do my best to keep this as audio-friendly as possible. But if you want a little extra treat, you really should go to our YouTube, which is over at youtube.com/StarcastShow, where you can find all of our past video shows. Because for this episode, we are going to be showing some art as we talk about art. So check it out.
And it's really, really cool art, guys. Like, I'm not a big, huge art person, but I was geeking out pretty hard this afternoon when Garrett spoiled some of the stuff for me. So
I was losing my mind. I was like, Jocelyn, take a look at this. Look at all this stuff that didn't make it to Hearthstone that is so awesome and needs to make it to Hearthstone.
Oh, that is literally probably 5% of all the stuff that's in years worth of folders.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that is the case. So, let's get into it. Let's talk about it. So, I mean, Blizzard games, kind of in general, they're I've always been impressed by Blizzard because they seem to kind of celebrate the art. They never really try and cover it up. You walk around BlizzCon, if you've ever been, it's just as much hand-drawn, hand-painted, well, digitally, art as the eye can see. It's like, gone are the days of the 90s where we were so excited that we can make a 3D render of some dude chomping on a cigar with a gun in his hand. You guys have kind of gone back to the roots, I think, because I don't know, that's what I'm into. And that's the thing I've always enjoyed about Blizzard. So looking into their games across the board, there is a difference in style, but they all kind of share this key where they're all painterly in a way. Maybe StarCraft deviates from the farthest, but like Diablo looks like a Frazetta painting, and Warcraft very much has this painterly illustrated vibe, and you guys really took that and ran with it for Hearthstone. So what is that process like for kind of reaching that finished Hearthstone style? You know, you guys got the vibrant colors, you can see the paint strokes. It looks like an illustrated book.
I think a lot of that has to do with my own personal history. I was the first artist at all that was brought on to the team. And as the first artist would move into the lead artist position. So as such, it kind of fell to me to figure out what the style would even be and what it would look like, which is where a lot of those concepts and illustrations that you have in the folder kind of come from, is what we call our blue sky phase as we try to figure all that stuff out. But because I was a traditional illustrator, traditionally trained in oil paintings and the like, I have a real affinity for and a real love for that older style of illustration. So like Frazetta and all the ones you mentioned, like, definitely spoke to me. And you're right, the early stuff, if you look at the older Blizzard stuff, if you look at, Chris Metzen's drawings for a lot of the manuals for, Diablo and Warcraft, if you look at a lot of the Sammy early pieces, and heck, even Sammy to this day doesn't walk into a meeting without a clipboard and a pencil, behind his ear. Really, had that kind of handmade vibe to it. And that's part of what we wanted to bring into Hearthstone. Frankly, it's also playing to my weakness, which is one of my many, which is I don't manipulate things three-dimensionally. I don't know how to, do different things in Maya or Max or any of those things. I am a 2D guy. So we found something that would celebrate that look and feel that I know and loved, and wanted to kind of bring back into a video game type of setting that, feels like as you're playing the game, you don't really know, is that 2D, is that 3D, until something goes off and you see the shadows and the lighting and everything kind of back it up. So it was a lot of fun to kind of figure out. Yeah,
that kind of mindset seems to have worked in your favor with Hearthstone, because you're clearly trying to evoke the feeling of a physical card game. And
Sure.
anyone who's played a physical card game, well, they're impeccably flat. You're playing with literal pieces of paper.
Yep.
So it seems to have really worked.
Yeah, it was just very exciting to try and figure out what that would be for us. I mean, when you take a physical game and make it 3D and at the same time digital and flatten it out, on a screen, how do you make that translation? So that was a lot of the source of our meetings for months and years.
So we've mentioned, obviously, you're working with a digital format, and that allows you to kind of like play with things a little bit more, and including, I think the biggest one for Hearthstone in terms of the actual cards is the shape of the front doesn't match the back, and so there's all kinds of different changes and things you can play with, and some potential challenges. What would you say was the biggest challenge to the digital card format?
At least early on, I know the design team felt very, very strongly that we really wanted these to be cards. We wanted them to be something that everybody was very familiar with, the form factor of cards. You know how they work. They shuffle. They deal. You know what it means to cut cards and all that other stuff that comes from a card game. I wasn't as convinced early on. I definitely took some convincing for a while with a lot of the design team, because I wanted to make a collectible game and kind of get away from the cards, because, hey, we're digital. Why do we have to do these flat card things? And we've done that kind of stuff before. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. So we came up with some of the earlier concepts that weren't cards at all. And what we found was that over the course of the weeks and months that followed that path or that thread, we realized that we were really kind of eschewing or putting in the closet that thing that worked for us, which is that common language. People know what cards are. They know how to work with cards. They know how to interact with cards. And instead, we were making it, and by we, I mean making it more complex than we really needed to by saying, hey, this collectible now does this, and it looks like this, and isn't that pretty, and isn't it awesome? It also came with a lot of background explanation. And what does this thing do? Why does it look that way? What does it have to do with this? And why is this valuable at all? So when we put it back into cards, we did it kind of our way. We did it in such a way that it didn't just feel like a card, but it had a state change. So now the card game we know and love, you bring the card out of your deck, and when you play it, it kind of comes to life by dematerializing the card around it and it landing in the space and moving of its own accord. So I got to kind of split the difference. It's still a collectible in the sense that it's got its own life and it's doing stuff, but it's still based around the card motifs that really help create a common language for players.
It seems like it fits the general kind of Hearthstone mantra of, simple yet complex at the same time. So
Sure.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys just nailed it as such a strong feel across the whole board, and being such a Warcraft nerd, I'm just like, yeah, no, if mages played card games, this is exactly what it would look like. Maybe these
That's awesome to hear.
These over-engineered stone cards with metal rims for no reason whatsoever, and then they magically turn into other things. I just love it.
Well, you can't make it in the real world. It's like that's the kind of cards I would want. So let's do those here.
Yeah, exactly. So as I try to load into our images here, the Hearthstone box, it's now instantly recognizable to very, very many gamers, and certainly the folks listening to this. What was the inspiration kind of behind the Hearthstone box? Because to me, I immediately think like Jumanji, if Paladins on the Alliance had crafted it.
Sure. Definitely a lot of early conversations with Jason Shays, our producer, and Eric Dodds, game director, and Broad, and a number of other individuals. we kept trying to find what was the binding thread or a unit for the game. And we knew, cards were it after, they had traveled the long road to convince me that cards were in fact it. Ben, stop arguing. And we got cards out on the table. Then it became kind of okay, but where do they go? And how does all this other stuff work? There's a lot of other things with card games. We think of Collection Manager, we think of the different modes of play, all of that other stuff that you take for granted with physical cards that we really wanted to kind of create a home for. And it was very quickly becoming a game wherein the UI is very present throughout the whole of the game. And typically user interface exists in form of a frame around your window. If you look at World of Warcraft, if you look at StarCraft, any of the other games out there, there's a frame around your window which holds all the buttons and the ways you interact with the game. Well, the whole motif that we were trying to really go for with the game was that this is a game that the denizens of Azeroth play themselves. And if we're going to sell that, you also need to feel as though you're playing it in Azeroth. And there's a sure way to break that, which is to stick a frame around it and a bunch of buttons. So we wanted you to feel like you're interacting with everything, and that went for the user interface as well. So we tried to give it this binding element or single go-to thing, and that ended up being the box, where it just felt like this is a thing that you could put under your arms, carry to your favorite inn or pub, and play with your friends, and then close it back up and go home. And it just kind of is it's your binder. If you think of like card collections today, and it's where you put your cards, it's where you put your maps, your dice, all that kind of stuff that you would end up doing with any game. This is this for Hearthstone.
That's awesome, because the physical organizational aspect of any card game is something that anyone who's played them, it's definitely something that you get really kind of ingrained in, but you never really think about it.
Nope.
I don't know, unless you're really into those like hot anime girl playmats that I always see every time I go to my local store. But other than that, yeah, like I've got my big box of just game stuff. There's all my
Sure.
my X-Wing miniatures on top of my Magic cards.
Well, it's almost ceremonial in nature, really. I mean, it's the idea that you've organized it just so. You have to pack things back just right. It's somebody else getting in there and messing with your organization is, it's frustrating. So it's your own thing. It's kind of the way you make it yours.
Yeah. Can't put the swamps with the islands, man. You can't do that. Stop it.
Nope. Corrupt each other.
So you're talking about the UI. Were any of the early iterations of it wildly different? And if so, how?
Every one of them. We have a really healthy and great culture of basically just allowing the stupid idea to propagate wildly. It's like, just come up with something. Doesn't matter how dumb it sounds. Doesn't matter how dumb it is. Just get it out there and get it out the sooner the better. And just kind of figure out the right way to go about things. And really just kind of talk it through. And the only way to really do that, we found, certainly when working with Derek Sakamoto, our UI artist and designer, and Dodds himself, and Broad as well, is that you have to propose the stupid idea yourself first if everyone's going to feel comfortable doing it. So we all the time will say, hey, here's this dumb idea. Please don't do this, but something like this. And start to propose something that later we look back and think, geez, I'm really glad we didn't do that, sometimes as we're saying it. So like, this is a box cover that we know and love today. This is no different than what you interact with in the game. It's got your 3 different modes of play, and Collection Manager, and pack opening, and all sorts of stuff
and
in
an
there.
ominous space for a 4th button.
An ominous space, yeah. Something that truly could be called foreshadowing if we wanted to put the term to it. Who knows, right?
Just waiting for Lindsay to jump in front.
Should just straight up written that on there instead of the filigree that you currently have. Just like
she's
a nice
not
script.
even here. I'm just doing my thing, and she's making faces at me.
There is no 4th button.
So moving on. So yeah, this is the menu we all know and love. But what about the other images you brought to the table here? We have this, what I'm assuming is a mock-up for the menu, for what apparently was called Warcraft Legends.
Yeah, so I don't know if I knew that.
There is a document that we passed around as recently as a couple weeks ago for a number of the new people who hadn't been privy to what were really some horrendous meetings to try and figure out, what is this thing called? What are we going to call it? What will we not feel embarrassed when Chris Metzen gets out there with that Metzen voice and booms it out across all of BlizzCon? Yeah, some of them were just real stinkers. Some just downright awful. Most of them, I would say. But
Can you give us any examples of the truly awful?
I mean, Warcraft Legends is as good as it got. Let's put it that way. That was the best of the best at the time. And actually, we ended up getting somebody in the list itself had Hearthstone or something related to Hearthstone, and Ben Brode was like, "That'd be cool just by itself, right? What do you think?" And we got to thinking about it, and it created a lot of symbolism. It created a lot of symbols and things that we could really pull from. And of course, the artist in me was like, "Oh my God, there's so many great graphics that come from that, right?" The idea of the Hearthstone swirl, this being put here, all of a sudden I see all my buttons in the head or how we're going to go about this. Even the point of the psychological side of it too, right? You use your Hearthstone to go back home. You use it to go back to the inn, the warm, friendly, safe place where you can play a game and be with friends. Like that idea as well. Initially, when you open the box, you were faced with these series of books. I don't know why books. It was just one of those, traditional fantasy motifs that you see. It's kind of the first thing you go to. It, in this case, literally was one of the first places I went.
Well, it kind of
and just try to figure it out.
Again, the binder feeling where, if they had binders in Azeroth, they wouldn't be a cheap little plastic thing. They'd be leather bound.
Yeah.
With some type of filigree, maybe, metal edges and corners as well.
Yeah.
It makes sense. When I first looked at this, I'm like, what is this? Why is everything slightly different? And I looked at the title of the image, and it's like books. I'm like, oh, they're bookends. That makes complete sense now.
Everything's super loose, nothing really rendered, just to get the idea out there and kind of talk about it.
Yeah. And this is where Jocelyn's just like, yeah, here goes Garrett. Yeah, no, this is where I totally got. I love seeing unfinished art. Like,
sure.
I love seeing
the
thought
process is awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, so like, how long did you guys stay on the idea of having the menu be a stack of books? Was that pretty much here and out gone the same day?
Days, maybe,
Days.
If that. I seem to remember Dodds kind of giving me this look of, no, it's books. I don't know. It just feels so, Diablo and this, and it's not really, I don't know. And, the more he was talking about it and the more Derek and I kind of bounced the idea around when talking to some of the other people on the team, it was just like, okay, so I opened the casual book. Like, what then? Like, what's in the book? I don't know. So we started trying to figure it out, and it was, you know what? Maybe books is bad. So we skipped it and went on to other stuff.
So, like the magic box?
Like the magic box, right? Because if there's no books, let's just give you a swirly, purpley magic nether, and maybe that's going to be better, because then we don't have to define anything physical at all. It's just this kind of, swampy purple gas that you can kind of pull out different things from, or they would come bubbling up to the top, as you selected one or the other. And some element of this is still kind of around. If you think of...
I was about to say, when you open the pack and you look at the 5 cards...
A little bit, but actually more directly would be arena, right? Like if you finish your arena run and it come bursting open, and you've got this, voiding smoke that goes where, who knows, but out comes, 3 or 4 boxes, depending on how you did in your arena run, with your prizes in it. So it was this kind of like box of holding, that goes nowhere and who knows.
Looks like at the end when they're looking in the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders.
That was bandied about, yeah. Much YouTubing was done.
Cover your eyes. Okay, all right, and then we also had, you guys had a
Simon Says.
Yeah, you call it Simon Says, which I love, and it's this compartmentalized. It's 4 corners and a center button, which I'm assuming would be collection. The open book.
This Derek actually mocked this one up. I think Derek was working on this one while I was working on the book one. He was heading this one up, and we both kind of looked at each other with all of them, and it was just this one. I forget, it was either he or I, when it came up, initially reached out and just kind of pressed the screen and made a boop, boop, boop. Okay, yeah, we're done. We're not doing this one. So this is bringing back too many bad memories of childhood. So
I saw this one and I immediately thought like deck slots. I was like, oh yeah, there's my collection, and then only 4 deck slots. Oh my God.
Yeah, see? Not so bad with 9, huh?
Yeah.
Could have been 4.
Oh, imagine how many more tweets you all would be getting.
Here they come.
Where are they, guys? We'll pay for them. Just put them in.
Yeah. You've already mocked them up. Just give us 4 more deck slots.
No, see, I mocked them. I didn't mock them up. I just said there could have been 4.
I was looking through these images you sent too, and one of them, and I think it's in the ones we're not really sure when we'll talk about them, but had like a slide bar, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna show this, and people are gonna lose their mind. They're like, see, they were thinking about putting in a slide bar. Where's the deck lists?
Oh yeah.
But Yeah, okay. So this is probably my least favorite of them all. So I'm glad you
Good.
didn't go with the Simon
Ours
Says.
too. This one didn't last hours. It literally, like, the time it took him to put it on a screen, and we were just like, that's bad, right?
Nope.
So,
Get out of here, Simon Says.
yep.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad you brought these. Thanks.
You bet.
So, I mean, we've talked about the interface for the PC. This is the one that we're most familiar with. And transitioning it over to the tablet doesn't seem to be like there's that many changes. But I can imagine there's a lot of changes that are going on when you're taking it down to the size of a phone. So can you just kind of speak to a little bit of like the, I guess, artistic design changes you had to make to go from like desktop PC to smaller tablet to even smaller phone?
Sure. Tablet worked out really well because, as you said, the dimensions just kind of lent themselves right to it. And we didn't have as many. We were actually very pleasantly surprised when the UI suffered as little as it did. And really our biggest challenge at that point was to say, okay, well, how inclusive can we be into as many models of iPads and tablets in general as possible? So really it became a question more of performance at that point, and how are we going to get those things put together in such a way that it's going to make a reasonable download and everything working prim and proper on the iPads and tablets of the world. Our biggest challenge, or one of the right under the wire challenges, I should say, came with the golden cards, actually. The golden cards,
Really?
we were super happy.
They're my favorite.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, because they were on the wire for iPad, because they were going to take a hit when they hit iPad when we realized how large they were file-wise. And I got to mention Kyle Harrison, who really stepped up and was able to work it out and able to really figure out, as our tech artist on the team, just how small we could make those and still get everything to work. He was largely responsible for a lot of the shaders that went into it. And John Briggs and Beck Abel really, busted out a lot of really strong goldens initially, and now Jeremy Cranford's doing the same thing. But Kyle really was able to manage it in such a way that we see them at all when it's on the iPad, which I'm with you. I'm glad they're there, because I play it on iPad almost exclusively nowadays. Once we went to the phone, there's, of course, a slew of challenges that come from that. And that's purely, at this point, the size and scale of the screen, right, and readability. So much, as you mentioned earlier, was put into keeping things simple and clean and straightforward, and easily legible, easy to understand, that when you shrink it all down, it becomes that not at all. So we had to figure out, again, how to do it all over again with something that we thought was already as simple and clean and straightforward as we could make it. So when it came to shrinking it down, silhouette read came back out. We started using the same terms we used before, as we started making the desktop and tablet versions of, what distance can you read this? And now we've got this, annoying finger coming in on top of a phone that's going to be blocking things and keeping you from seeing what you're clicking and all of that kind of stuff. So really a lot of it came down to layout, and collection manager, keeping that very easily understood. The play screen was going to be difficult because there's a big board there with 4 predominantly, very omnipresent corners. But where are we going to put the cards? Because we've lost some height, right, on the screen. It's a very narrow screen now, being on the phones, particularly if you look at the iPhone 6s that get wider but not taller in that pattern, if you look at it horizontally. So a lot of that aside, Derek and our new UI designer, Max Ma, really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what made that space work best and really feel natural. And most importantly, you shouldn't see, though you will notice differences, you shouldn't feel differences when you go to the phone, because it should feel just like the Hearthstone you knew already on tablet and PC. It should just work. It should just be something that you go over to and you understand what you're doing and you understand why, and God forbid you shouldn't have to learn the game all over again. So,
Are we going to have gold cards in the phone? You've really freaked me out now.
Gold cards were working last I checked. So
okay, good.
Yeah, I'll go back and check again, but everything was looking tip-top.
Fantastic.
Have you had the chance to see the people who have not jailbroken but modded their phone to play Hearthstone already?
I've heard, I should say. I know that a number of us had tried it too, right? Initially, when we were trying to figure out the design for this, it's like, well, let's just carry it straight over. How does that work? It doesn't. It doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good.
I had the chance to try it.
We made these cards, and I'm thinking, I can't even read that or know what this card does. And I vaguely remember this, and I should know this, but I can't read it. I don't know what's going on. So it was one of the clearest indicators right out of the gate that, okay, there's some changes we got to make. So let's, suck it up and get in there.
Thank goodness people are breaking the EULA so we can really try it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, I gave it a shot on someone's phone at BlizzCon. I was just like, this is horrifying.
Yes.
The misclicks are so common.
I was going to say,
Yep.
I misclick on the tablet. I can't even imagine what's going to happen when I play on my phone.
I do that all the time and let go too soon.
Hopefully it'll all be humorous and, on to the next game.
Casual only. No ladder.
So moving in the card art, how does the design process for card art work? I'm kind of assuming like with new art that the mechanics of the card kind of help inspire the art, but has it ever gone the other way? Was there ever just a piece? Because there is reused art, so I'm wondering if like you looked at a picture of something, you're just like, oh, we have to design a card around this.
So thankfully, and you are thankful too, that I am not involved in card design. As we were talking about earlier, I make it pretty, and that's the extent of my job. But from day one, when we were making this game, Eric Dodds, the game director, posed again and again and again, Ogre Ninja has to be in this game. At some point, some way, shape, or form, Ogre Ninja will show up. I don't care how. Brode would try to remove it and put it over to this set, and it would be like, what are you doing? Put it back. Let's try and figure this out. We can't just put it under the carpet. That piece of art is going in because it's a fun piece of art. It's an early piece from Sammy, and it's this giant two-headed ogre that is very skillfully and very intelligently hiding himself into being a tree by holding two branches in his hand. It's just one of those things that kind of really plays to the whimsy and the charm of Hearthstone. When you see it as an image, you're like, that's just cool. That's super cute, super fun, and it just worked really well. So once that got in the game, Dodds had a real personal sense of triumph, and frankly, I think it's a great piece, so I was glad to see it too.
This is one of the cards that I did not notice at first. I was like, oh, it's just an Ogre Ninja, so he's in the shadow looking and posing, and then I look, I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, that's just wonderful. That is just wonderful. It
really is really cool.
Made me so happy. The other Ben, Mr. Brode,
Yes.
dropped this bomb to us on Twitter over the weekend saying that the chicken token art was commissioned to be exceptionally angry as a nod to our podcast. And that kind of blew my mind.
Well, we already had a chicken, right? So we had to figure out another way to make him, an even angrier chicken or that kind of a thing. So yeah, he did ask, is there any way we can get this really, truly just nutso angry chicken in the game? And the artist that we were working with, whose name eludes me, I'm so sorry, but really talented guy, came up with a number of sketches, and I swear it was just like, that's not bad, but now really, really angry. Like how about like the mouth askew? How about we stick the tongue out a little bit? It's just really, really went for just belligerently angry. So
Really had to channel your inner Garrett rage on that.
No, like Garrett dying to crackle angry. Like that's what we're going for here.
So you did mention that there's some old assets, some new assets, some stuff that was, commissioned specifically for, like, say, GVG. So how much of it is actually reused from other sources, like the original TCG, versus like actually creating and commissioning brand new stuff when you're doing a new expansion or adventure?
It's hard to put a number to it. Certainly, the initial release had more because we had a larger stock of it then, and we still have a fairly large stock now. It was awesome to see Goblins versus Gnomes be the first major expansion for the game, and daunting at the same time because the designers picked the subject that we did not have a large art bank for because we had never gotten there with that art. So we had to do more commissioning on Goblins versus Gnomes just because there just wasn't a lot there. But even ones that we do have a large art bank for, like Curse of Naxxramas and now Blackrock Mountain, didn't have maybe the style that we would need for Hearthstone. They would be a little too epic or over the top or aggressive or any of those things. And for Hearthstone, you really want something a little more light, charming, 20 degrees off of World of Warcraft, something that's a little bit rounder and plumper. So because of that, some artists who maybe didn't do as many pieces for the TCG or even World of Warcraft as a whole, kind of got to come back into the light a little bit, or more of a spotlight on their work because it plays perfectly to Hearthstone. So it was really thrilling to be able to give people like Matt Dixon, some more work with his stuff, and he's the gentleman responsible for Noyatron. A lot of
So
those
he's my
things.
favorite person ever, is what you're telling me.
Matt's pretty awesome.
If
he's a good guy.
If I don't see an Noyatron cosplay at this year's BlizzCon, I quit.
I would be pretty excited to see that myself. That was a fun one to work on. I basically just sent him an email and said, honestly, dude, it's just got to be the most annoying looking construct the gnomes could possibly come up with. And it's like they're trying so hard to be annoying that they're kind of queuing into everybody else's ideas of what annoying is. So the poor thing just comes out as charming and as awesome as possible at the end. So he's like, right, I'm on it. Good British bloke. I can make this annoying, all right. So he got right in there and just started playing around with it. But he's a fun guy. He also did Target Dummy. So that should give you
great.
a view of his breadth.
That was the card that for whatever reason, I walked away from BlizzCon last year as the poster child in my head of Goblins vs. Gnomes, was Target Dummy.
It was a fun one. I really liked that idea. That was one, for instance, where even not being a designer, being an artist and knowing immediately, oh God, I know what the mechanic for this has to be, right? Like this just plays so well into that. Let's stick some dynamite at the base of it. You can hit me, but I'm going to cause some damage if you do. That kind of fun idea just came through. But I agree. I love his stuff, and I'm glad to see more of it.
I also love the narrative behind that card, that somebody would look at that and then still take a swing at it.
I see. Because damage needs doing.
Exactly. So you mentioned, having to commission new art because maybe the style just isn't there. In the original TCG, there were a ton of notable illustrators with all kinds of very unique styles that were commissioned to make art.
Sure.
So if you look through all of the original Warcraft TCG sets, they all have really wildly different looking art styles on each card, which is something you see in a lot of other card games. But for whatever reason, to me, because I was so, as a fan, I felt like I had a good understanding of the Warcraft look and world. I noticed it way more with the WoW TCG than any other card game I play. So when new art is needed, are you still going outside of Blizzard for illustrators, or are you mostly staying internal?
Quite a bit. A lot of these are people that I'd worked with previously. A lot of them are fellow illustrators that I've known for years. Some of them are brand new, and I'm super happy to work with and make their acquaintance every time. It's really an awesome opportunity, and frankly something I think makes the game stronger, to be able to go to such a broad range of artists from literally across the world. We've got, I would say we probably have touched on almost every continent to be able to get some of the talent that for this game, from you name it. But that's one of the joys of this, is getting to go outside and not be sequestered just within a team within four walls, but really get to work with a lot of those individuals. Jeremy Cranford is now responsible for a lot of the art management for the external artists, but we work together regularly to keep it in line with what Hearthstone's after, but at the same time celebrate the broadness of it and really kind of look at illustrators that have a style that's very unique to themselves. You look at something like Raymond Swanlin, a lot of his stuff has a lot of texture and a lot of graphic quality to it, which you wouldn't necessarily immediately assume is perfect for Hearthstone, but what it's perfect for is things like spells and things that it's a little bit harder to kind of wrap your head around, these ethereal, kind of more ephemeral shapes, and he's great for that. And then go right back to your Matt Dixon, or even more high end, your Todd Lockwood. Lindsay's just throwing her phone around. Just ignore the banging and rattling.
Okay.
She's like, Raymond Swanlin's amazing.
She missed me. She was trying to hit me with it. So it's if you look at like Todd Lockwood, he's definitely more polished and high end, but he brings a sense of beauty, to some that makes sense to do. So nice, beautiful priestly card, with something from Todd on it is perfect, and it fits very well. I would hate to see us get to the point where everything felt exactly Hearthstone, because I think that's the time when it feels exactly dull and exactly kind of monotone. Everything just plateaus out, and there's nothing challenging there. You want stuff in there that kind of gets you as a player to look at art you wouldn't normally necessarily feel attracted to, and some that play right exactly to what you were hoping for from a piece, because it just has that persona and vibe.
So you talked about different styles, different illustrators, and kind of the range that you've got over there. I'm a hunter player, or I was for a very, very long time.
Okay.
What happened with King of Beasts? Because I mean, you look at Savannah Highmane, and that's a lion, and then you look at King of Beasts, like
He's just
what
chilling.
happened?
He's chilling. He doesn't need to go anywhere. He's the king of the beasts. He's got nothing to prove.
All right.
It
He
just,
just
I
looks
mean,
so laid back.
I know it's surprising, but there's not a lot of lion art lying around in the WoW banks.
I see what
we
you
didn't
did
really
there.
have a ton to pull from. So having done Savannah Highmane, that left us with another lion that we got to use, and that was the King of the Beasts. But at the same time, he brings a sense of regalness and air to it, and I would probably imagine that Broad or whoever named him probably did so based on that guy's kingly pose. So I don't know.
I would pose this to you, Jocelyn. I mean, come on. I know you're a Game of Thrones fan. King Robert Baratheon not exactly looking like he's going to go slay some people anytime soon.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So Savannah Highmane is like the muscle, and then the king is just sitting back on the throne.
He's
Got it.
already conquered. His conquering days are long over. He's just kicking back with his goblet of wine or, gazelle blood. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So as far as in-house artists that work on Hearthstone, how many are there? Like, do you have a very strict Team 5 like art team that work on the illustrations, or do you go outside and have artists from the WoW team or from the Diablo team also kind of kick in some submissions?
I think at this point we've had artists from every team chip in with some. It depends on the size of the set, and certainly the subject matter oftentimes as to whether somebody feels kind of inspired to grab one here and there. The time that they have, if they're really busy on their own teams, obviously my job isn't to mess up Sammy and the guys over on Team 1 and take one of their artists that they need. But at the same time, I'm pleased and flattered that there's a number of people at the company that want to do it and want to dive in and really kind of feel a part of the game and make it their own. The Curse of Naxxramas is maybe the best example of this, where we had 30 cards, and about half, a little under half, we needed new art for. And in every case, for every one of those that I can think of, I believe every one of them are Blizzard artists who did those. Which I think comes to a tune of about 12 or 13 pieces people ended up doing. And it was all in-house, and it was across all the teams. And that was a lot of fun, because that being our real, his first adventure, hence first kind of expanded content for the game, to have that as insular and inside Blizzard as it was felt really awesome. It felt kind of like we are all collectively making this game and chipping in on it, and everybody was excited to do so. So yeah, any chance we get, every time the calls go out for another expansion, Jeremy and I have a steady stream of people kind of coming by our desk or, email, hey, is there any room in the next set? I'd love to dive in, especially if you've got a gnome or especially if you've got a creature or stuff like that. So everybody's interests are wide and varied, and it's awesome. We get to, every once in a while, somebody on the team itself will also kick in. I know Jamaro Kindred, who's our concept artist on the team, recently did a piece that I can't talk about because it's coming out soon, but it will be a part of the new stuff. And then myself, I did the coin, so that one's in every game, but and actually the Hunter hero. So.
Oh,
Nice.
you did Rexar.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very nice.
Yeah, the very Batman-like Rexar.
Yes. Oh man, he's so badass. I instantly gravitated towards Hunter. My main in WoW is a Hunter too, but I saw that and I'm like, oh yeah, that's me.
I play a Hunter in WoW pretty exclusively, so when that came through, I was like, I think I'll be picking this one up.
It's very, very much the Frank Miller huge kind of rectangular Batman.
I love it.
That's great. I did not know that going into this. That's awesome.
You mentioned that sometimes people come to you with different things. Like you said, sometimes they might want to draw gnomes, or they might want to draw, whatever their kind of unique thing is. There seems to be a lot of things in Hearthstone that aren't so unique. You've got, something like totems, mechs, murlocs, ogres. How do you go about making sure that each card is instantly identifiable? Because it's really important to be able to just look at a card where you only have a couple minutes to play each turn and just be like, okay, yes, I have this, that, and the other thing, and I want to make these plays. So how challenging is that to make each card look unique in those specific groupings like the totems and the tokens?
That one comes down, you basically nailed the two things we look at the most, which is the shape and the color. Shape read and color palette are right fast and away the two things that we go to most often. Even Eric Dodd's, game director, not going to look at art as his primary thing, but it's still something that he does look at or is influenced by and somehow informed by, recognizes that I don't have to necessarily always be able to see exactly what the image is, though I would like to, but I do need to know what card it's attached to. So even if it's that's the thing with the darker black shape in the bottom right corner and a lot of orange, that's such and such. That's this card. That's it's muscle memory kind of takes over at some point, and you start to kind of understand what you're looking at just from association and time. So we play to shape read and color palette first and foremost with those things, especially with things whose shapes don't change much. Like if you look at totems, it was a great example that they only really look one of two ways. You've got alliance totems and horde totems, and that's it. So once you've kind of exhausted that, you have to kind of figure out a new interesting way, something looking up, with a camera down below, something from on top, more than one possibly, and using them in the background as, supporting elements to it, all sorts of stuff. And then when it goes to golden versions, how do I make these look different than the golden versions of all those other totems? Because, their eyes are going to be glowing and the effects are going around it and all that stuff. You can't do that the same every time either, or you run into the same problem. So
it's so complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Max is like, well, we can just add a couple more bolts, and apparently you can add orange afros to them.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a rule with mechs, but yeah. But yeah, I can totally see totems and like murlocs, getting challenging.
Yeah,
it's like,
murlocs.
well, you can only draw a fish person so many ways.
They're not so bad. I mean, if you think about the fact that totems are just this, ramrod straight piece of wood with maybe some wings coming off it, that doesn't ever change. At least a murloc, you can pose him. So he's not so bad. It really is the inanimate things or the objects that are more difficult.
No, that's a good point. So moving on, we've talked about designing the front of the cards. What about the back? Because, dude, some of the card backs in this game are just gorgeous. Like, they're pieces of freaking art. I'm going to throw it up right now. As someone who works on some physical card games, I just look at these and I just kind of weep because I'm like, oh, this is just so awesome. Why can't I make something this cool?
Thank you.
I mean, and you sent this image over. Jocelyn and I both took a look at it before the show, and we were just like, there's so many card backs now. We didn't even realize that there's been this many card backs already.
Yeah, and I had to edit some out. What does that tell you?
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, come on, there's other card backs coming. Lindsay's just looking for an excuse to kick my chair now.
Well, it's because you've done such a good job so far. She's just like, well, I was looking forward to kicking Ben, and he hasn't given me much of a reason. So,
press train, come on. Yeah, these are some of my favorite things in the game, to be honest, from a visual side of things. There was something that early on when it came up as an opportunity to, we could do a lot of things with these backs. They don't have to stay the same, which is the top left one in the image here. That was something where it was like, wow, yeah, God, we could do anything, really, right? So the first three were actually the next three after that. If you look at the Black Temple, the Pandaren, and the Charm card, those were the first three done after that. And it was just really kind of testing the waters and seeing, like, what could we do? Setting the set of rules, really, to them, because there is kind of this loose set of rules to the shapes that are incorporated there. You've got two sharp curves in the lower right and the upper left, and two gradual broader curves in the upper right and the lower left. The centerpieces always have a series of spikes, save in the Tespa card back version and the Legend. And then all the rest of them have those spike elements somehow, some way, or even alluded to lightly. The swirl is always present, but it doesn't have to be always embossed or debossed. And then really from there, that's kind of it. And everything that follows after that is just kind of a bonus or an extra. They're just a way to add a lot of personality to your deck. I mean, the thing that always struck me was being, again, creative and artistic in my own set of things. I'm an awful card player. I've tried in any number of different games, and usually I found that I would build my deck around, well, that's a nice piece of art, and I've always liked that piece, and Todd did a good job here. You can't put that in your deck bin. It's the wrong color. Come on. That's typically how I would build those things, and you pretty much know what kind of gameplay came after that. it failed miserably every time. So something like sleeves for cards, I could totally get behind, because now it was like, oh, this is like a whole world. You could make your own sleeves. You could, really theme and add some personality to your deck. So these are really kind of like the card sleeves, of physical games, currently, and how they play in. Then the added bonus of the fact that, if we work with different regions on things, or, different groups or organizations, it's a nice way to kind of give back and kind of add some of their own personality to something that, is uniquely theirs. And, that came up with the TESPA card back, and I thought it was awesome that, we got to give to a community that's doing so much for players, in the student body, or, in educational organizations. So those kind of things are really great when you get to do that. And none of it's bound to game rules. None of it's bound to, what ifs, or gosh, in the future, we're going to have to be careful if, we introduce this deck type or this mini. Doesn't matter. It's, a beautiful piece of art. Wherever we can put it is awesome. So.
I think that TESPA card back's probably my favorite, and it's the one that I can't get.
It's only your favorite because you can't get it.
Well, yeah, that could be. You can argue that this is probably like the most collectible limited edition thing, because a lot of these, if you don't hit 20 in the season, there's no way to get them now. So, I mean, the cards you can always craft, but card backs,
Eric Dodds brought up a good point. They're a lot like the Disney pins, right? When we were talking about collectibles and what makes a collectible, Disney pins were something that came up, and they go back, ages, right? Those have been around for as long as Disney in some cases. And there are some pins you just can't get anymore, and it makes them more collectible, and it makes them something that when you see them, you kind of have a bit of nostalgia and kind of love, even though knowing while looking at it, I can't get that thing. That's something I'll never have, but it's awesome to know that it exists, and it feels of the world that I love, so.
Yeah. Are people specifically within Blizzard constantly sending you backs that they want to see in game? Because I know, obviously, participating in forums and Reddit, like everyone's always like, oh my God, what if this is a card back? Oh, I want to see this. Do you get a lot of that even internally?
Surprisingly, no. They want to do the card art, but I haven't. I just 2 weeks ago got an email from a gentleman who wants to do one for a very specific reason. It was a very good reason. And it's one that I think could be really cool in the future. So I'm talking to him, and we're going to see what we can work out. But he's the first, really. I was surprised, because these are the things that, God, I hated giving most of these over to Jamaro so much, because they're just so much fun to do. And now he's doing the bulk of them now, and I hate to see him go. But they are an awesome piece of artistic license, really. And I would think it'd be awesome if more people wanted to pick some of these up internally and kind of run with them and see what they could do.
That is the answer I've been most surprised with so far, because like in my head I'm just like, oh, I'd kill to do a Hearthstone card back and just be like,
I'm surprised too. I think these are some of the most fun things to do. These and the logos. I enjoy doing both of those two things the best. So.
Great.
I would like to give people ideas. I can't draw stickmen, but I would really like to tell people what to draw.
Oh, they show up online, and they're neat to see. When people put them up online, we all send them around the team. Ooh, did you see the one this guy did, or did you see the one this girl came up with? These are rad. So it's fun to see. It's really neat to see the community pick them up and kind of do their own thing.
I love that you guys are so involved in the community in that way, like, just getting right in there and, passing around community work. It's awesome.
Oh, it's fun. I mean, that's the most humbling part of it, I would say, is that it's very flattering and very humbling to know that people want to spend that much of their own time and effort and, in some cases, cost on some of this stuff. You look at all the people who, I think there's more than this, but that I've seen 4 or 5, really solid moves at making the box, out of wood and metal, and my goodness, like I want one of those, right? Those are right? Super cool, but to know that somebody or any group of people are taking the kind of time to put something into that you spend a lot of time yourself thinking up and coming up with is very flattering, and it really kind of makes you feel like it's stuff worth continuing doing. So
that's awesome. So moving on from something you've clearly designed a million of, well, not a million of, but many. Something that we as players have only seen 2 of, the card packs.
Ah, okay.
Now, again, kind of back to the card packs. Like, are these as fun to design as it appears they are? Because
sure,
I love these to pieces, and I can't wait to see more.
Well, the pack itself was super important to us. not just in its physical existence, but the opening of it as well, right? So it's something that really kind of replicated that emotional and psychological part of the real world experience had to be replicated in a world where it's not physical, but we really want it to feel as such. Getting the pack exactly right was a real endeavor, and really trying to figure out what is this thing. The first one, the one on the left, took obviously the most time as we try to figure out what that thing is. And I've got couple sketches elsewhere of this thing opened up where the wax seal is broken and it's all laid out, and it kind of looks like what you would imagine the old craftsman's tool rolls to look like if you think of the leather rolls that come out, and then the cards are kind of tabbed in there. Of course you never see it that way, because when you open these things they burst open to life and it shreds it every time.
They explode.
Yeah, so it was one of those things that you work up just to believe it yourself, to kind of figure out the physicality of what you're designing, and then you promptly just kind of shelve it and, okay, I get it, and we're going to do something different with it. The one on the right is obviously the newest one. That's the Goblins versus Gnome one. That's all Jamaro. So as Jamaro, Kindred, and I were talking about what we put into the original pack and what we're hoping to see from the next pack and hence future packs, similar set of rules, a little bit looser, right? From the card backs is we've got to have a band going across the middle of it. You've got to have a seal of some kind in the middle of it. The swirl has to be present on it. We talked a little bit about maybe there's the set icon on there instead of the swirl, but what we found was ultimately it has to feel like Hearthstone even when removed from Hearthstone, and the theming of the pack itself should be enough to carry it. So once the swirl went into place and we've changed it up slightly, not unlike the card back, it felt right to do it that way.
Nice. So now the opening animation, who's in charge of that? Because good job. That's all that's all I have to say on that.
Well, we split that again. This one is the initial concept for the very first card pack opening. And in fact, it's so old that you can see we still hadn't settled on what the card pack looked like, if you look at the left side. And then the cards themselves, if you really have an acute eye, don't have the swirl on them yet. It's just the globe from behind the logo in World of Warcraft. So we kind of had this motif for a compass rose, but we hadn't yet settled. This was actually done pre-naming of Hearthstone, so we didn't have the name. So you can see what value comes from a good name is suddenly all the iconography fell into place, whereas before we just had some materials. This was the initial concept, and there was really a lot of talk around the office. Certainly as you talk about our own experiences in card games, it was extremely important to replicate that experience. I mean, any experienced card game player will tell you there's something about that smell, and that feeling of the foil pack, and when you open it, the smell of the ink, and that kind of that packaging material. You laugh, but we had long conversations about it. And that feeling of like that initial adrenaline rush, right? And knowing the special card is always 4 or 5 in and it's in the middle, and you quickly flipping to get to that one. All of those things were very, very realistic psychological things and ties that we had to the physical media. So you take all that away, and how do you give people a like experience, particularly one that you're asking them to invest their time and more obviously their money in? And it really came down to we have to give them something that feels like they want to collect this, and more importantly, gives them an experience that they want to repeat and they enjoy enough that it feels right. It feels exact to what you would expect, magic and all that stuff you can't do in the physical game. Being a digital game, when and wherever possible, you play to that which you just can't do, be it materials you can't really craft anything out of, or certainly the magic that you can imbue into any of the things. So this was the ultimate result. Blow it open, do the explosive qualities to it. I mean, it certainly had a lot to do with John Zwicker initially as he was doing the first opening to it. The Goblins versus Gnome one, I can't claim it all. I've got very, very little to do with that one other than just looking over a shoulder for art direction at that point, and honestly, that was a back and forth between Jamaro and John Zwicker, figuring out what felt right, and more importantly, what felt like gnomes and goblins, and what made it feel different. It certainly set a great bar. I don't know that initially we thought too much of it being different, but then of course very quickly leveled at it's got to be different, right? It's got to be something that feels tied to this pack. Certainly when you saw the work and effort that went into the pack, immediately you realize like we can't just put the same explosion. It's got to be different now. So kind of set a tread now for the next one and the next one and the next one. So
I'm just excited to see the next pack, which unfortunately we're not getting in Blackrock Mountain because it's an adventure. So everyone will get the same cards. But
yeah,
but no card packs.
I know.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Just mock
I
one
know
up
we're
and
not
just
allowed to
post it
ask,
'cause
so.
it's cool.
Oh, and you can ask.
He just can't. Yeah, like the other Ben that's always on. He'll just be very kind, just be like, guys, I can't answer that. What is wrong with you?
There you go.
Well, Ben, you've been really generous with your time. I was wondering if we could kind of rapid fire style go through the other
Sure.
images you sent in.
Sure.
Because you talked about the collectibles at the top, and so there's a few in here that you sent that are named collectibles. So what is this first one, which seems to be a sketch of, well, I'm not even sure what to call it. It looks like a chalkboard that is also an armory slamming down
Yeah.
on a stone floor.
This was during, again, that blue sky phase, right, where there's no such thing as a bad idea. This came during a period where I was really left to my own devices, working with one or two other people just to figure out what feels cool. This is one of those things where looking back at old board games and old, as you said, Jumanji and all these things that did a good job of translating a fantasy world into a real physical one. One of the ones that struck me from just the gameplay aspect and just the physicality of, I remember how you played that game based on just touch, was Stratego. And if you look at the old Stratego sets, you had to pick these pieces up and kind of move them. And if you were really, had good friends, somebody had the electronic one, and it would do all the things for you when you pressed it on that little holder on the side. This was kind of inspired by those old Stratego sets where they're kind of upright and it's got the portrait in there. And then depending on what the class of the card was, you would get weapons pop up for the warrior. You would get these kind of mage devices pop up for the mage, or druid would have a series of vines and flowers possibly. But these were meant to be these pieces that would quickly kind of populate out on the board when you summoned them. And then crush and destroy before they blew away into dust. So.
Oh man, I loved Stratego. I used to play that with my dad all the time when I was growing up. And now that you've said it, I'm just like, oh my God, I can totally see it. When I first looked at this image, I was like, what is even, is this the game board? Like, what's happening right now? But now that you've said it, I'm just like, oh yeah.
Loved it as a kid.
Yeah.
Great game.
Oh, that's wonderful. Then the next collectible that you sent us, it was just called Original Collectible, and it looks like to be almost like a minion. It looks like it has an attack and a health value.
That was the first one. That was the hey, what could this possibly be? Before, when I first started and when they handed me what we had at that point, it was really, really digital, very, very loose. Being the first art guy, it was like we don't have anything artistic input into this. It's just pure design. So they were just squares with the image. So it was really like, okay, if this is going to be digital, let's go digital. Let's do something. This is obviously when I was pushing I really like for this to be something other than cards. What if it could be collectible? What if it was like a locket or a box or, these kind of different things? What if? Ultimately, I had a card side of this one too, but this was initially intended to be the minion in play. And what we very quickly found was you put about 3 of these on a board and you're full. So that's not going to be very useful.
They're very ornate.
Little bit.
Lots of extra bits.
It's a gorgeous piece of art.
It is.
I'm just like, man, it would be awesome if my, Tyrion...
It had a brief life as the hero. Because we figured, well, we only get one of those, that's fine. And brief, about a week, and then it was like, okay, actually, this isn't going to work. I'm just going to have to put this away.
Yeah, my mind immediately races to what the hunter version of this would look like and what the paladin version would look like. Actually, the paladin version would probably look very similar to this, but
probably. I'd love to paint all of them. They all sound awesome. I had a blast doing this one. This is actually Jason Chase, the producer, and one of my favorite pieces from just that phase of iteration.
Yeah, it's strong. And really, really, Chris, you were talking about loose. I was like, I'm going to call you out, sir. This is a finished piece. This is very tightly done.
Yeah, early on, being an illustrator background, there's no such thing as showing your unfinished work, right? There was always the finished product. So I tend to polish things a lot more back then than I do now. I'm a lot looser now and certainly a lot faster. I'm still nowhere as fast as Jamaro, thank goodness. But a lot of the early stuff were all finished. There was a lot of paintings, fully rendered paintings in those days.
Gotcha. Now with this one called Charming, which I'm just in love with all these little bits that I'm looking at. But again,
minions.
What were these were minions?
Yeah.
Oh,
You're kidding me.
No,
we were
these
trying
are
to figure it out, yeah.
All minions. If you look at there's the what if it's a night elf? Okay, well it'd be a moonwell or moon pool with these different wisps that kind of come out. What if it's more of a shaman? Maybe that would be more of like a wooden totem piece with feathers and such attached to it. Or it's a straight voodoo guy, that's kind of using the face of the art that's on this voodoo doll. Mages might get this little glass vial that you would smash up on the board to kind of invoke the spell. And of course, gnomes is this over-constructed piece of conglomerate brass and silver, who knows what.
Looks like the most over-elaborate way to light your cigar.
Yeah.
I imagine clicking that thing in on the
simultaneously.
right side and flame just burning off your mustache.
Pretty much.
And if you're a gnome, it'd be a green mustache.
That's about all it's going to do. This was just an opportunity to kind of figure out more of like, what did it mean to be charming? Because we certainly knew it early on. We want it to be that. We want it to be very whimsical and charming, and these were the ways we went about doing that and kind of figuring out our way. And again, polished, rendered, early pieces. So,
yeah, this is
They're beautiful.
thank you.
Some good stuff. Now, the one moving on with, again, kind of the process, the physical card image, which, again, really nice, tight, finished stuff. I actually really like the card on the left.
I think, yeah, Garrett, and that's one of the things that we agreed on when we first looked at this. We're just like, oh, yeah, design on the left.
The left one is great.
That was my favorite. I think that one and the middle one. This was definitely okay, if they're going to be cards, what kind of cards can they be to make them truly ours? And that was with let's go with rare materials, let's go with velvet and leather and metalwork and chased, ribboning and gems and stones and all that stuff put into it. So it's like, we can't actually make these, but they feel really cool and they feel kind of like cards those in Azeroth would play with. So certainly that was the goal for this one, was to kind of replicate what would Azeroth's playing cards look like. We agreed. The one on the left felt the strongest. The one on the right, everybody immediately berated me because they said it looked like a teddy bear. You got the ears on the top, the two little slit eyes on both sides, and the red nose.
Oh, yeah, wow.
The red mouth and the blue nose.
You can't unsee that.
Nope. As soon as I say it, right? So that was what stuck in my head, so that one went away. And we played around with this a little bit, but if you look at it, a lot of stuff stayed, right? Like the health gem is still very much the health gem. And the idea of this kind of tabbed in or tipped in paper piece at the bottom, still very much how your card information is shared. Even to a certain extent, the rarity gem, right? If you look at that middle one, not the same bracketing, but the idea that that's where the gem goes, that kind of stuff definitely carried through.
Very cool. How did you eventually land on the kind of like the cracked stone look that we have today?
It was partly the material thing again. Let's go for things that are ornate and feel hard to make in the real world, something that celebrates the digital, but more importantly, simple. Clean lines, clean shapes, clean colors. And as beautiful as the one on the left is, that's even more ornate than really what our golden cards are. Though you may not think so, it is if you look at just the value level and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So we really wanted to simplify it back down. And once we found that oval portrait, just kind of getting a base substrate that we could put against and letting it live and breathe by itself, and then adding later the race motif, the race motif or class motif around the outside if you've got like, the vines that are more druidy or the more rogue kind of aggressive looking black and yellow. That's where we use that simple canvas of just that kind of cracked stone and board feel and built on it for instructional purposes, right? Like when you look at it, I know what a warrior card immediately looks like and rogue and otherwise. It'd be very difficult to do that on these more innate cards. So.
Gotcha. And I saved the image that left me with the most questions for last, the paper construct image.
Oh, God.
My
Blue
brain
sky.
went
Anything's
to,
a good idea, right?
my
Even
brain
those
went
which are
so
obviously
many
bad.
so many places when I saw this. I was like,
Yeah.
like epic pop-up book? Like but then I'm like, no, and then I start reading the notes on here. I'm like, no, this is like crazy epic origami.
Yeah, so early on in development for the game, the thing that came up the most and the thing that we squashed the quickest because we just didn't want it to look that way was, Star Wars chess set. That's just what everybody would say. Like, oh, yeah, I get it. Oh, our version could be like the Star Wars chess set. They come out, they animate, they move, they fight. And for a number of different reasons, the size of the team was, we knew, never going to be big enough to accommodate that kind of animation, workload. The rigging, the animation, the modeling, all the character stuff. That's just not the kind of game we wanted to make. It also felt a little too battle chess. We really wanted something wherein the collectible is the valuable thing, not that which the collectible does, but rather it in and of itself. So I kind of tried to skirt the edges of it a little bit here, and it's like, well, it is the collectible. It's just when you play it, it kind of wads up into this ball and then populates on the board, and it's kind of an animated piece of paper. And it's, this orc or this goblin, and the board itself or the environment is also pieces of paper. So it kind of became this Johnny Paper, if you Puff the Magic Dragon and Johnny Paper type of stuff. God, I'm there. You guys have no idea what
No,
I'm talking
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Aging myself again.
I'm with you. I'm not going to say what age I was when I watched that film, but we'll just say that yes, I caught your reference, Mr. Thompson.
There you go. Right? That was kind of one of those things. It just felt like this could feel cool and feel energetic and fun and new. And immediately we were right back into and who's going to animate this? And the answer is not me. So we got to figure a better way around it.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, this is such a far departure. All of the other process pieces that you sent over, I was like, yes, okay, I kind of understand how this exists in the realm of Hearthstone and maybe what came before it, but this was just so out of left field. I'm glad you sent it over. So again, podcast listeners, just real quick, just jump over to YouTube, take a look at this image because my words are not doing it justice. So
you're building it up. You're building it up.
That's why, real quick, just take a peek. Take a peek. So, well, Ben, that really just about doesn't it. Again, you've been so generous with your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
So thank you for joining us. Before you leave, where can folks find you? You know, do you tend to run around on Twitter yelling things at the top of your 140 characters, or?
I think this is the age thing again. I don't spend near enough time on Twitter or Facebook if we consider that to be a prime mode of communication. That said, I'm at Ben Thompson Art. I think I'm saying that right for Twitter. You just at Ben Thompson Art. And if not, Broad will link you. He links me a lot with a lot of questions and art that comes up, and I do my best to answer them. Only having 140 characters helps. As you can tell, I'm a little bit wordy. So. But other than that, yeah, I'd say Twitter is probably the best place. And other than that, I do check out the forums from time to time via the website. And, you know, I've chimed in a handful of times, but not very often. But we check them out.
Well, awesome. Everyone go check it out. And again, just to close it out with a nerding out over Blizzard, you guys have just done such a bang-up job over there on the team. I love the look of Hearthstone, and it's one more game in the long history of Blizzard that just clearly celebrates its art and does such a good job and doesn't try to, I don't know, polish it up too much and just kind of lets it be art, and that's what I love about it. So,
well, thank you. We feel very, very fortunate to have it as a game to apply the art to. It's perfect for us.
All right, well, great. Thanks again for coming on, Ben. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon or see you at BlizzCon in November.
Absolutely. I look forward to both.
All right. Have a good one, Ben.
Thanks
You
a lot.
too. Bye-bye.